Yes.
I feel like I hold it next to me because otherwise I'll just
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, inshallah, we can do that. If you don't mind.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everyone. Alhamdulillah, we are blessed and fortunate to have another program, our second in-person program with Ihsan Coaching. Our dear brother Farhan Ahmed, who is the founder of this beautiful organization. Alhamdulillah, last time he came and he blessed us with a beautiful presentation regarding the premarital affairs, how to search for a spouse, and various aspects that are related to that. This particular session is related to the keys to living a fulfilling marriage. So post-marriage, how do we live a happy marriage, inshallah? This is a very important topic. And I just wanted to remind everyone that, alhamdulillah, we're so blessed and fortunate to be partnered with this wonderful organization, Ihsan Coaching. We'll be passing around flyers about this organization. What do they deal with exactly? Individual coaching, premarital coaching, marital coaching, religious consultation, and so on and so forth. Alhamdulillah, Brother Farhan and Ihsan Coaching, they've given us a special rate. So whenever it is needed for anyone in the community to receive coaching from their various coaches and counselors, alhamdulillah, they have both male and female counselors as well, so it's easy, or coaches, I should say, because I know there's a difference between coaching and counseling. But anytime anyone needs this service, inshallah, we have a special link. Please contact us and you can get that link, inshallah. There's a special rate for that. And even for those who cannot afford to pay that special rate, our social services will step in and help those people who are in need, inshallah. So I know several people in our community have taken advantage of this wonderful service that we have to offer in this partnership. And I know Brother Farhan has been updating me. Obviously, we keep all the names confidential. He doesn't mention who has gone to him, but he has mentioned the number of people who have utilized this particular service that we have. So, Jazakallah khair, Brother Farhan, for joining us today all the way from Chicago with your family, alhamdulillah. And inshallah, without further ado, we'll have the presentation. And after the presentation, we will leave time for questions and answers as well, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي ربي يسر ولا تؤسر وتمم بالخير السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So before we get into this topic today, which is a very important topic, I just want to give a brief background of myself because I know I look very young. I get that often that, what do you know about marriage? How long have you been married for? So alhamdulillah, I've been married for 13 years. Got married when I was 20. I'm 33. Have 3 kids, a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 2-year-old. So not have I only learned it from a theoretical perspective, I've also lived it as well. I think that's very important when you talk about marriage and when you help others that are going through marital issues. So just a very brief background about myself. So I have my master's in clinical mental health counseling. So I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor. You know, I've been married for, well, it says 11 years, but now we're 13 starting next week, inshallah. I worked as a therapist seeing children, teenagers, adults, couples, and families. Studied 3 out of the 6 years of the Alim course and focused on a lot of different diagnoses. Now, what I really want to talk about before we start on how to make a successful marriage is why is this topic very important in the first place? You know, the Prophet ﷺ said, "An-nikahu nisfuddin," that marriage is half your religion. And I can't tell you how true that is. And obviously, if you talk to a scholar, Mufti Saab, or anybody else, they could tell you how important marriage is. I mean, you're completing half your religion. And the Prophet ﷺ encouraged us to get married and to have many children as well, so that he can have the biggest ummah. But unfortunately, what's happening is that we're going through a crisis right now, where marriages are collapsing, where families are breaking apart. And not only does that hurt us on an individual level, but that also hurts us on a societal level. When divorce becomes so rampant or becomes very high, now it just becomes more acceptable, and you see families breaking apart. Not only do the people that were actually married get hurt, but even the children get affected by that as well. So that is why it's so important to remind ourselves, right? Reminders are so beneficial to the Muslims. And we need to have these topics on a regular basis and talk about marriage and why it's so important to work on our marriages and how to keep them intact. You know, we spend so much money, you know, getting married, but unfortunately we don't spend any time or effort or even money trying to save our marriages. And as you can see over here on the collapse of marriage on the slide, 1 out of every 3 Muslim couples get divorced. So that means 33.3% of Muslims, and the rate is only getting higher every time, is getting divorced. And there's 5 main reasons for marital discord. What are they? And not in no particular order, but they're finances, sexual intimacy, interest, like what I like, what you like, you know, in-laws, and family and friends. Those are the main 5 reasons for marital discord. So as you can see, 40% almost is because of other people that are causing issues within our marriage. So the couple might be on the same page, but then somebody else comes in and says, "You're going to let him talk to you like that? Or you're going to let him go travel with his friends? Or how dare, like, you're okay with your wife working, or you're okay with your wife not cooking this kind of food that you like?" So now Shaitan is playing, and these people are whispering inside the couple's ears, and then that's causing a lot of marital discord. So why are we talking about this? Because couples are not working on their marriage. If we look at it statistically, it takes 6 years for a couple to actually go in and see a professional, somebody like myself or another licensed therapist or a marriage coach or somebody. It takes 6 years before they actually work on their marriage. Think about how much resentment builds up within that 6 years. And then when you come to somebody like us, it's very difficult to work on the actual marriage. So I always give this example that it's like car maintenance. You know, you buy a new car. And when you buy a new car, you don't need to do anything to it. You know, they've already done, it's a brand new car. But after 5,000 miles, you need an oil change, or if it's 10,000 miles for synthetic oil, and then you might get the tires rotated and so forth. But let's say you don't even do that, right? I had a friend, he didn't know anything. He bought a brand new car. He didn't change the oil. He didn't do the tire rotation. The car still ran. The car was still fine. But eventually, after 15, 20,000 miles or more, it started to break down. He took it to the mechanic. The mechanic said, "Now you got a bigger problem. You should have came back and just got the regular maintenance, and it would just been 30, 40, whatever, $50 or so. Now it's a couple $1,000s. So same thing with our marriages. If we're constantly, routinely coming to lectures like this, learning about our marriage, trying to maintain it and trying to improve, then you'll see how the relationship thrives. But if we constantly just let it go and don't work on it and just we're okay with the status quo, then we're going to see the problems within our own marriages, and eventually it could lead to a bigger problem. So there's no guarantee that the next marriage will ever work, right? And if we look at it statistically, right, for non-Muslims, it's about 40 to 50%, right, depending on who you ask, for the divorce rate. So they've done research that shows that once a person gets divorced, the next time they get married, they're 60% more likely to get divorced a second time. And now they get divorced a second time and they get married a third time, right? So they're on the third marriage. Now they're 70% more likely to get divorced. So what does that show us? That, you know, the many times that we get divorced and get remarried, we have a higher percentage of chance that the next marriage will not work out. So we might as well just put a lot of effort in our first marriage and trying to see, okay, what can we do to improve? Now, that's not to say that we should stay in a bad marriage, right? If you're getting abused or something is happening to you, that's a different case, right? But often what we're seeing is that most couples are getting divorced, especially between the years of 1 to 3, right? The first 3 years. And this is where we call the adjustment phase. You know, it took me and my wife, I'll be honest with you, about 4 years before we finally understood one another. Because I was so used to my lifestyle, she's so used to her lifestyle. So then when you get two people in the same house and they're living together, it takes time to adjust and learn about one another, what their likes are, what their dislikes are, and you know how to make the marriage thrive. So a lot of times nowadays we're seeing is that couples are not giving each other enough time. So I don't want to go too much on the collapse of marriage because we have a lot to cover. But I do want to talk about one other thing. I know we already did a seminar on premarital, but I see a lot of new faces. And I just want to emphasize the fact of why this is so important and why, as parents, I see a lot of adults in here and a lot of people that are marriageable age, why this should be mandatory. You should just not get married because you're getting married to a quote unquote good khandan or good family. You know how they say, oh, this is a good family. We already know about them. Okay, the family might be good, but how do you know about that individual person within the family? Every family has that black sheep. Every family has that person that, you know, mashallah, on the outside, they look great, but nobody knows what's really happening inside with that person. I mean, we all know these kind of people. So why are we putting our most precious, our gems, you know, our children inside these marriages without doing our due diligence? Just having them talk for a couple of times is not good enough. You know, they don't ever, like when a lot of couples come to me or come to our organization or any other organization and they say, yeah, we already talked about everything. By the time they leave, they're perplexed. They're like, oh my gosh, we didn't talk about A, B, C, D. We didn't talk about all of these things. And I'll give you some examples, but I want to just tell you about the statistics as well. So 92% of couples reported that premarital counseling was helpful during the first year of marriage. So 92%. 80% said that even after 4 years of marriage, it was still helpful for them. I mean, think about this. I got married when I was 20. How many of you are married? Whoever sat down with us and talked to us about what marriage was? Nobody did. My parents never did. They didn't tell me what marriage was about. I had to learn it, you know, by being married. And that's the same with many of us, where we just were thrown in and now we have to figure it out for ourselves. We've seen what's happening probably in our parents' homes or other people's homes, and then we're like thinking, okay, this is what I might do, this is what I might not do, but that's not a recipe. That's a recipe for disaster. That's not a recipe for success. What's a recipe for success is actually going through a program like something like ours or somebody else's. And I'll just briefly explain. We have 5 sessions that we do. The first 4 is with somebody like myself. The last one is with our our religious consultant. What do? We talk about like the 5 main reasons of marital discord and making sure that everybody's on the same page. Not only that, we also talk about other things like religiously, how do you see yourself? Because not everybody cares to practice as well. Some people might say that a religious person is praying 5 times a day. Some people might say, like I have a friend that says, oh, you know what, as long as you pray 2 to 3 times a day, I consider that a religious person. Everybody is on a wide spectrum over here. Just because, we're Muslim does not mean we have the same ideology or the religious, background as well. So it's very important that we talk about these questions. And I'll give you one example of why it's so important. This is the first question I ask people when they come in. What is your expectations? What is your expectations? Anybody here not married? Or just raise your hand if you're not married. All right. I'm going to ask you, one of you, whoever's comfortable, what are you expecting from a spouse? Who wants to answer?
Be nice to me.
What?
Be nice to me.
Be nice to me. Okay, what else? What else? That's funny. All right, be nice to me. Yes.
Respect and love.
Respect and love. Okay, I'm looking for respect. I'm looking for love. Right? What else? Anything else? All right, so this is what I call cute answers. Very cute answers. I want to be loved. I want a best friend. I want somebody that's going to respect me. Of course, that's what we want. Why would we want the opposite? But what I always say when I delve into this is that what are you really expecting? What do you actually want in a wife? Do you want a wife that works? Do you want a husband that does 50-50? Do you want a husband that helps and cooks and cleans around the house? Or do you want, like, so forth, right? Like, when you're marrying a woman, what kind of woman do you want? The more traditional lifestyle? Or do you want a woman that's more, quote-unquote, modern? And there's nothing wrong with either or, but it's just, what are you expecting? When my parents got married, they had clear expectations upon themselves. My mom was a housewife. My mom took care of us. My mom would cook and clean. My mom would do all of that. My dad would earn. He would, work. He would make the money. He would support the family. There was clear expectations. Nowadays, the lines are blurred a little bit, and that's fine, but we need to define what are we looking for in a spouse. Unfortunately, we just give these cute answers that doesn't tell us anything about what we're actually looking for. Then when we get married, we're expecting the person to change to how we want them to be, and that never works. So it's a recipe for disaster. That's why it's so important that we talk about all this beforehand. And often what happens is that a lot of people come to us and they're already, quote unquote in love, or they've been talking for a while, and it's very difficult for them at that point to ask each other the hard questions. But that's why you have an expert that will ask those tough questions and make sure that you're aligned. And we're not looking for the perfect spouse, we're looking for the most compatible. And there's a difference. Perfection is only what Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and his wives were, right? But compatibility means that there's going to be ups and downs, and there's going to be differences, and that's okay. But the more that we accept them and they want us as well. So last thing I'm going to say is that we've done 30 of these in the last year and a half, right? Where the couples who are looking to get married have came in. Out of 30, 6 of them went through our program and have called it off. Now you can say that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think that's a great thing. Why? Because they realize that this is not for them. This person, they were going to make a wrong decision. And we're not in the business of trying to break up people. We never do that. What we do is we give them questions for them to ponder about. We ask them all of these questions. And now what happens is that they come up with their own conclusion that, yeah, this is not right for us. And we highlight what some potential issues could be. So we're trying to be proactive, not reactive. The prevention is better than the cure, right? Prevention is better than the cure. All right, now, what did you guys come for? So I gave you the prelude. Let's get into the real topic now. So, relationships. So Dr. John Gottman, who's the leading marital therapist in the world, he's done 3,000 case studies. How many of you heard of Dr. John Gottman? Okay, so some of you have. So he's done over 3,000 case studies over a 20-year period where he's followed these couples. And with 91% accuracy, he's been able to determine whether they're going to remain married or get divorced within interacting with them for 10 minutes or less. So he talks about there's 2 relationships. There's a master relationship and there's a disaster relationship. And what is the master relationship and what is the disaster relationship? We're going to get into. So I'm not going to explain too much about the disaster, but when it comes to the master relationship, I want us to understand that a master relationship does not mean that everything is perfect, that everything is going to be perfectly okay. What a master relationship is that there's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be bumps in the road. There's going to be times that me and my wife don't agree. right? We agree to disagree. But even in that agree to disagree, we understand one another. She's willing to listen to me, I'm willing to listen to her. We understand each other's viewpoint, and we could come to that conclusion that, okay, this is what you think, this is what I think, and we agree to disagree, but we're not going to let it affect our marriage. That's the key. We're not going to let it affect our marriage, that there's a bigger picture, and I'm not going to allow it to, this issue, to cause problems within our marriage where we constantly fight. And we could come over that, and we could overcome it, and we'll be perfectly fine, because at the end of the day, we have a higher purpose. We have something else that we're looking forward to. So that's what a master relationship is. That, yes, we don't always agree, but at the end of the day, we don't let it affect our marriage. Now, what is a disaster relationship? It's pretty simple. You know, we allow all of these little things to affect our marriages, where eventually what happens is that we come to this end. And we're going to get into all of the things of a disaster relationship and how to avoid them, and what is the antidote for all of those. So, if you think of a marriage as a sound relationship house, and you have these two pillars. You got these two pillars. The first pillar is trust. Now, trust doesn't mean always that this person cheated on me, or this person's going to cheat on me. You know, that's what the first thing that often comes to our mind, that, you know, infidelity. Now, infidelity is always wrong, right? I mean, especially as Muslims, we know that. But if I don't mention this, I mean, this is something that we do see that happens, that Muslims do indulge in infidelity as well. And only 20 to 20% of couples said that an extramarital affair was actually the reason to blame for the divorce. So that means that 80% of people are saying that it wasn't actually the extramarital affair, there was more to it that caused me to get a divorce. Now, I just want to say again, having the extramarital affair is wrong. Obviously, we know that from Islam. But just to put everything into perspective. Now, what does trust really mean? Trust means that this person is going to be there for me, that I could lean on them, that I know that they're going to have my back, right? When I turn around, they're there. They're going to be there for me. Now, what is the other pillar? He says is commitment. Commitment means that you're not taking this marriage as a joke, that I am committed to this person. I have both feet inside the door, not 1 foot in, 1 foot out, right? You know, you see people like a teeter-tottering, they're not sure. One day they're like, yeah, I'm not sure if I want to stay with my husband or my wife. The next day they're like, yeah, I really love them. They're not committal. You don't know. Now, if you don't have trust and commitment, why would the person ever share their personal thoughts, or, you know, what they're thinking with their spouse? Why would they open up to their spouse if there's not trust and commitment? Right? So that's why these are two pillars that are very important. Because if I don't know if my spouse is going to be there and I could have them and so forth, I'm not going to open up, because now they could run away with all my secrets, and now they could tell anybody and everybody. And that's going to be a problem for me, that my business is going to be out there. So trust is knowing that, okay, I could tell my spouse, and they're going to hold that within them, right? Al-majalisu bil-amana, that the majlis is an amana. So what I tell my wife is going to stay here between us, and that she's committed to this relationship. She's not going to run away as soon as I tell her something that, you know, that she might not like. Now, once you get these two pillars, there's different foundations. You have 3 foundations inside of it. The first is what we call friendship. Friendship is the most important. Friendship is the most important foundation, and we'll get into why friendship is the most important foundation. See, a lot of times this is what happens. You know, you got a couple. They go to an expert. They go to an imam. They come to somebody like us, and the couple comes in and they start arguing, right? The husband starts saying, you know, my wife does blah 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 blah. The wife says, well, my husband, he's like this, blah 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 blah, right? And goes on. Now what they do is they keep going in storytelling mode. The husband will tell stories about his wife to make sure that the person, the expert, is understanding their point and getting it, why they're saying all this stuff and giving examples. Then it's the wife's turn. She does the exact same thing. And back and forth, till eventually a couple hours go by, or in our case, 15 minutes go by. The person stops them, right? A so-and-so expert stops them, and then they say, okay, let me try. Let me give you some words of advice, right? Let me help you. You guys love each other. You have kids. Your families are friends. You guys should stay together. You guys can work this out. Don't worry. And then they say, okay, this is your issue. This is what you're complaining. This is what you're complaining. So let me do this. You do X, Y, Z. You do X, Y, Z, and let's see how things go. And then everybody feels good, right? Everybody feels good. They leave, and 2-3 weeks later, you get a phone call back. It's not working out. The reason why is that conflict resolution never works if there's no foundation of friendship. If I am friends with my spouse, then only can I work on the conflict resolution part of it. Think about this, your best friend. Everybody should think about who their best friend is, right? I have a best friend. Now, my best friend could call me stupid. My best friend could call me dumb. But I value that relationship. I know that he's there. I have that trust in him, and I know he's committed to our friendship. So even if he calls me dumb, if he calls me stupid, I just shrug it off and I'd be like, yeah, you know what? I see it from your point. And then we just go about our day. But why is it that I could do that with my best friend, but then when my spouse says, raises their voice, or they say, Farhan, you're an idiot, or Farhan, why'd you do that? All of a sudden, I'm like, do you know who you're talking to? Do you know my maqam? Do you know who I am? What's wrong with you? And both husband and spouses do this. The reality is that there's no friendship, right? Think about this. Most couples are in it because we have so much invested in one another. Maybe we've earned so much money now we have bank accounts, and getting divorced would be very difficult. Or we have kids. But there's no real friendship where we turn to each other and we talk for hours, or even 10 minutes, and I'll get to that point, why I said 10 minutes. So in this foundation of friendship, there's 3 levels, you could say, right? Or there's 3 things that need to be in there. Number 1 is enhancing your love maps, right? And I have slides on this, so I'm not going to go in too deep. Nurturing your fondness and admiration, and turning towards each other instead of away. So that's the first foundation. Now, once you work on this, can you get to the second foundation, which is conflict resolution? See, we're doing everything backwards. We're trying to manage the conflict without having the friendship, and that's why we keep reoccurring these problems. And then what happens is the relationship ends, right? So that's why we need to work on the first foundation, which is friendship. And I've done this with many couples, and so has Sister Asma from our team, and whoever does the John Gottman's way will attest to that as well, because this is what he talks about. And that's why we've implemented that this way inside of our institute, because anybody could say they do marital counseling or marital coaching, but I've seen it working 9+ years, that if you don't do it this way, yes, it could work, you have a good chance, but doing it Dr. John Gottman's way, who's leading marital therapist, you're at a higher chance of success, that the marriage is going to work out, and the couple is going to develop a friendship, and now that they're going to thrive and get that master relationship, inshallah. So now, in managing conflict, we're not going to get to do this principle today, this foundation, because it's just too much to cover in one setting. But letting your partner influence you, solving your solvable problems, and overcoming gridlock. Now, once you're able to do that, now you get to the third foundation. So think of it as levels. Friendship, managing conflict, and then only do you get to the last one, which is a purpose. Create a shared meaning. Now, me and my spouse have this purpose in life, what we want to accomplish. See, we could have that at the beginning of the marriage, but if the marriage is not working out, all of a sudden that purpose of why we even got married in the first place disappears. So that's why we need to build that friendship level up, so that we could remember our purpose and we could go towards our goals together, inshallah. So now we talked about friendship, and now we're going to get into the 3 pillars inside that, or the 3 things inside of that. So what does enhancing your love maps mean? So think about it like this. You have a compartment in your brain where you store all the information about your spouse, right? You know their likes, you know their dislikes, you know what makes them tick, you know what makes them happy, you know everything about them, right? And you keep it in this compartment. and you're learning more about your partner on a constant basis. And why is this important, right? Because number one, in knowledge, there's strength. The more you know somebody, the more they feel loved. The more you know you love them. So why is this important? Let me give you an example. Let's say I'm in the bathroom in the morning. I'm taking a shower. I notice my wife's favorite shampoo is ending, right? It's coming to an end. And I go to Walmart that day, or I go to Target, or I go anywhere, and I'm buying something, and I remember, I'm like, you know what? My wife's favorite shampoo is almost finished. Why don't I just pick it up for her without her even having to text me? So I buy it, and I come home, and I say, hey, I got you this. What do you think her reaction is going to be? She's going to be happy. She's going to be like, man, you thought about me. She's going to be like, oh, this guy understands me. He knows me, right? And her mood is going to be a lot better. Same thing, right? Like, I like chai. I wake up at 9 a.m., actually a little bit earlier, right? Fajr, and then go back to sleep and then get up, right? So I work also full-time IT, alhamdulillah. So 9 o'clock work starts. So now, before I start my work, if my wife brings me chai, because I like chai, it helps me wake up, that makes me think of her and say, man, who else would have thought about that? What other woman would be that caring for me? So now I have all these positive sentiments about my wife, right? So I'm enhancing our love map. And I'll get back to why those positive sentiments are so important, right? I'll get back to that. So that is why enhancing our love maps is the first thing, because the more you know about a person, the more in knowledge there's strength. And so if my partner feels that, oh, my husband knows so much about me, then they're going to have these positive sentiments. And when something negative happens, guess what? These positive sentiments override the negative sentiments. And now they're willing to shrug it off. They're willing to brush it off if anything bad happens. So for instance, like let's say my wife says something to me, right? She raises her tone, or she says something like Farhan, or whatever. And in my mind, I'm thinking like, why would he talk like that? Or why would he say something? And now I could respond negatively, and I could say, what's your problem? But now I'm thinking about the chai. Now I'm thinking about, for Juma, she ironed my clothes, right? For all of these things. So now I'm thinking, okay, you know what? I could say something back and make it a negative interaction, and then if the mood's going to be killed. Or at that point, you know what? Let it slide, because she's done so much for me. And she knows me. She understands me. So this is not a big deal. It's just probably something going on with her. And same way that I might let it slide, the next time I do something to my spouse, she's going to let it slide herself, because she's going to remember all the positive things that I've done for her. I took her out to dinner, I drove her over there, I did this, X, Y, Z. So she's going to be like, you know what? It's not worth it to fight, right? It's not worth it to get back and forth. Reason why couples do it is because we have a lack of positive sentiments about our spouses. We have too many negative sentiments, so that when something negative happens, we just think about all the negativity. And when something positive does happen, we're still focused on the negative. We're not focused on anything positive, because we have a negative sentiment override. So how do we enhance our love maps? You do this by asking open questions. For instance, how was your day? Who are your friends? What do you like? You don't just ask a closed-ended question where they say yes or no, right? That does not allow for conversation. Ask open-ended questions allows the conversation to flow. And we'll get back to, this as well, inshallah. So the next thing is nurturing your fondness and admiration. So what does this mean? How do you feel about your spouse? What do you think about your spouse? How do you feel about them? And why is this so important? Because you'll look when we get to the disaster relationship and we're talking about it, is that when you have a lack of respect for your spouse, or when you have this feeling towards them where, they're not worthy, then what happens is that when you feel like they're not worthy, you talk down on them, and there's contempt that comes in. And all of a sudden, think about people that we don't really respect, or that we don't think, quote unquote, are as smart as us. We might just ignore them. We might not talk to them as we would to somebody we respect, right? Like let's say the president or whoever's coming in, or somebody that we respect is in here. We might sit a certain way, we might talk to them a certain way, say gee, say whatever. But when we don't respect the person, we don't even look at them. We might be on our phones. We might not give them that care. right? So nurturing your fondness and admiration is so important. It's just appreciating the small actions that your spouse does and expressing how you feel about it. So it's as simple as saying something like, I appreciate today what you've done. And what it does is two things. It allows them to know their value to you, but it also allows you to remind yourself of all the positive sentiments that you have for your spouse, right? So instead of thinking negatively, now I'm telling myself, you know what? Actually, they do have this positive quality. They are good for this and so forth. And next time something happens, then I should not disrespect them. I should have this respect for them, and there's not going to be contempt. And then what's going to happen is that we're going to have a mutual understanding. So, going on. The last thing is turning towards each other instead of away, right? So this is the last thing of how to build a friendship. And what does this mean is that, we're trying for what Dr. John Gottman talks about is bids for connection, emotional connection. And turning towards your partner and not away means that, let's say that, my wife says, we're driving down the road, and she says, hey, there's a bird. Now, I don't care about a bird. My wife probably doesn't even care about birds. We don't even know anything about birds. They look nice, they look beautiful, mashallah. But she's trying to get me to converse with her. She's trying to get my attention. So she's saying, oh, look at that bird. Now, I could just ignore it, right? And ignore that bid for emotional connection. Or I could say, yeah, that's a pretty bird, right? Or, whatever. I know it sounds very cheesy, it sounds corny, but these are bids for connection that we do every single day. That we don't really care about something, but we turn to our spouse and we say something, and they either ignore us and then we feel hurt, or they reciprocate and then we feel better and we engage. And if we keep missing these bids for connection and we keep ignoring our spouses, eventually what happens is that they stop trying. And that's why you see that couples, and I said that 10 minutes a day, most couples cannot sit down with each other for 10 minutes a day. 10 minutes a day and just talk with one another. I mean, nobody has to raise their hands. And I'm not trying to call out anybody here. But I've seen this, I do this homework with almost every single couple I work with. I said, okay, and now I even lowered it down to 5 minutes because 10 minutes I just noticed nobody could do it. So I said 5 minutes a day, you sit with your spouse, you face them, right? Because the Prophet ﷺ, we learn in the Shamad, that when he would talk to somebody, he would face them and he would turn the body and he would look at them. And when he was done, what would he do? He would completely turn his back towards them to signify that the conversation was over. So, you sit with your spouse, you turn towards them, you put the phones away, you put the TV on, put the kids to sleep or whatever. You sit with your spouse, you look at each other, and you converse. And see how many times you can do that in a week. Just for 5 to 10 minutes. Most couples say this is so awkward. This is weird. I can't even sit and face my spouse. But I tell myself, that to me is very awkward. And I know there's a child in here, so just plug his ears for the next part, right? Because I say that, okay, we could be intimate with one another, right? Spouses could be intimate with one another, but yet we can't talk to each other. That's a jeep, right? If you think about that. That now I don't know this person, but on the first night or the first week, I could be so intimate with this person in every single way. But yet, now when it comes to talking, I find it awkward. So you got to think about this. I mean, how backwards that is, right? That we could do everything, we could have kids, we could procreate and all of that, but then yet, we can't talk to this person, the mother of our children or the fathers of our children and so forth. So, try, that's one homework that I want to give for everybody, but we're not done yet, but just a homework. So there's a lot of minor bits of emotional connection, but I know we got to speed up a little bit. All right, so disaster relationships. What causes a disaster relationships? And so the first thing is harsh startups, right? What are harsh startups? It's the tone that you use with your spouse. So Dr. John Gottman says that 95% of the time, the way that you start a conversation dictates the outcome of the conversation. So if I start off saying, "What's wrong with you? Why did you do that? Don't you think before you talk? Why didn't you do something, right? Take out the garbage." Right? I could have started off the conversation in a harsh tone, and now, even if I apologize in the middle of it and say, "I'm sorry, please forgive me, okay, let's talk about it," guess what? It's not going to work 95% of the time. And that's why you see that even if you apologize, the other person is in a bad mood, and now everybody's in a bad mood, and nothing works. So I could either start off in a harsh tone, or I could say, you know what, I don't appreciate that. You know, I wish that you did this way. You know, can next time, can you do so and so? Now, I convey the same message, but see the tone and see how I started the conversation. If I start off in a nice way, guess what? My spouse is more likely willing to listen to me and understand me and actually act upon it. But if I start off in a negative way, guess what's going to happen? They're not going to do what I said, and then eventually it's going to lead into a fight, an argument, and then it's going to go downhill. And it's going to go into the four horsemen where we're going to talk about. So, number one, harsh startups. That causes a disaster relationship. Number two, distraction by the wired world. So teens spend about 7 hours a day on their smartphones. Tweens spend about 5 hours a day. 8 to 12-year-olds, right? And adults, we spend about close to anywhere between that time. So think about that. 1/3 of our day is on our smartphones. And we could type messages, we could forward WhatsApp messages, you know, even if they're false or jokes or whatever. And we could do everything, but then when it comes to our spouse, we can't have a conversation. You know, you ever notice somebody, like, they could talk so much, they're sending millions of text messages and writing paragraphs, but when you meet them in person, now they're just quiet? Like, what happened with this person? On the phone, they're so talkative, but over in real life, they don't speak. That's how we are with one another, right? On the phones, we could talk for hours, but when it comes to our spouses, now all of a sudden, my daughter's waving to me, but all of a sudden, now what happens is that we can't speak to one another. We can't even have a conversation for 5 minutes. So we're distracted so much by the wired world, right? Whether it's our phones, whether it's TV, whatever it is. But we're so distracted, and that causes such a problems within our relationship. I mean, a lot of you probably could relate to this, or probably know somebody that does this, and I hear this often, is that, you know, I see my spouse, rather than talking to me, they'll be in the next room scrolling through Instagram for hours. Just going through Facebook Reels, Instagram Reels, right? TikTok Reels, whatever it is, for hours. I hear that all the time from couples. That, yeah, like my spouse will be in the other room and they'll be going through that. But then when I want time with them, they don't give me the time. Because we're so distracted by these things. So we have to put a time limit on it, myself included, right? First and foremost, is that we have to work on our habits of not being addicted to this. Now, the 4 sledgehammers. How much time do we got? I want to just make sure.
Up to you.
Okay. Are you guys getting bored? I don't want to. Okay. All right. I know you guys can say yes or no. I won't take offense. All right. So the 4 sledgehammers. This is almost coming to the end. We're going to talk about the 4 sledgehammers in detail, inshallah. So Dr. John Gottman talks about the 4 sledgehammers, or the 4 horsemen, however you want to say it. I like to say sledgehammers because, you know, they're like what destroys a relationship. So what are they? Criticism. Number 1, criticism. Why is criticism? And I have slides where we're going to talk about the antidotes, but I just want to explain this concept first, right? Criticism. Think about what happens when you criticize a person. When you criticize a person, you're talking down upon them, right? You're saying, why are you like that? You know, what's wrong with you, right? And the person now feels some negativity, right? It's hurting their self-esteem, and you're talking down upon them, and then eventually it leads to the 2nd horseman, which is contempt. And what is contempt? Is when the person now feels that they are lower in their eyes, that they're not worthy as much, and, you know, you are better than them. And when a person feels like they're not worthy, and they feel like, you know, you feel the spouse feels like they're better than them, then there's a lack of respect, right? Because we're humans at the end of the day, so that's why I'm saying this, is that let's be honest with ourselves. If we think of somebody lower than us, more than often, do we not respect them, right? And that's wrong, but that's what happens. And we talk down to them, right? And we don't give them the same respect that we would to somebody else. And then what happens is that when the spouse doesn't feel respected, and they feel like, you know, you think that, oh, you're better than me, then what happens is that we start defending ourselves. So now, instead of understanding what my spouse is trying to say to me, and my spouse is trying to convey the message, now all I'm hearing is you're criticizing and you're complaining and all of this, and I'm going to say back, oh, you're talking to me about leaving my clothes on the ground? What about you and your dishes? I don't see you clean up your dishes. I don't see you. You're talking about my relationship with my parents. You don't even talk to your brother. You don't even talk to anybody. And then we just keep going back and forth, trying to defend ourselves, and we're just going in a circle. And eventually what happens is we get to the fourth horseman, or the fourth sledgehammer. What is that? Is where we stonewall each other, right? So my wife now is speaking to me. I'm physically in the room, but I'm mentally checked out. Hello, do you hear me? Where are you? Why aren't you taking out the trash? What are you doing? And I'm just like, you know what? I don't even care at this point. And when you get to that point where you don't even care, it's very hard to come back, right? So your spouse is speaking to you, you're physically there, you're mentally checked out, and at that point, there's nothing much you can do at that point. It's very difficult. Now, so first sledgehammer, what is criticism, like I mentioned. So what is the antidote for this criticism? It's instead of criticizing, right? What we should do instead is it's better to complain, right? Complain is not always the best thing as well, but I'm just saying, like, let's be realistic about it, right? So criticism, what complaining does, it focuses on a specific behavior or event, right? There's three parts to a complaint. Here's how I feel. It's about a specific situation. And the last thing is, here's what I need, right? So here's how I feel. This is about a specific situation, and here's what I need. But criticism, what it does, it focuses on the person. So you see the difference. I'm not focusing on the person when I'm complaining. I'm just focusing on my feelings and what I need. So that's why it's the antidote. And I'll give you an example. So you say in the first one, you never want to spend the holidays with my family. You are so selfish, right? You never want to spend the holidays with my family. You are so selfish. So what is happening over here? We're criticizing the person. What we're doing, we're saying that they're selfish, right? So now all I'm not hearing anymore is that, oh, you don't want to spend the time with my family. All I'm hearing is, oh, you're calling me selfish? Okay, what about the time that you did blah, 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 right? And now back and forth, right? Instead, what would be slightly better, what would be better actually, is we agreed this year that we would spend Eid al-Fitr with my parents. When you made plans with your family without talking to me, I felt hurt and I felt you ignored my wishes. So, like we said, I'm not criticizing my spouse at this time. I'm just talking about my feelings, I'm talking about the situation, and I'm talking about what I would like to happen instead, right? So you see the differences between the two. Now, like I said, so that's the first sledgehammer. The second thing is contempt versus appreciation. So we talked about contempt, and before when I talked about friendship, I talked about fondness and admiration. So fondness and admiration is the cure to contempt. Because contempt is when you disrespect or you feel like there's a superiority in the relationship. Appreciation and fondness is when you start realizing the good qualities a person has, and now you don't have that lack of respect. You put them on a higher pedestal, and you think that, you know what, my spouses have these good qualities, and you know what, they are on my level, you know, like we're a good match, right? And you start to realize that, and you don't look down upon them. So let me give you an example. You're tired? I've been with the baby all day, and all you do when you come home from work is sit on the couch and play those stupid video games. I don't have time to deal with another child. You're pathetic. I used to be in acting class, actually. In high school, I played Dracula. So, when I get these chances, it comes out of me a little bit, right? All right. So, instead, contempt. That's contempt, right? So, what appreciation? I really appreciate if you could help me with the baby. This was very helpful for me the other day when you took care of him during my nap. So you see the difference? One, I'm putting down the person. The other time, I'm appreciating what they did. You helped me. You helped me with the baby. That was very helpful. I'll appreciate it more. When my spouse appreciates me, or when they say something like, thank you for getting me this gift, or, I really like that you did so-and-so, or I appreciate that. It makes me want to do it more, right? It makes me want to do it more. But when I never feel appreciated, guess what? Then I'm like, okay, what's the point? Why should I even try, right? You never, even if I do it, you're never going to even appreciate it anyways. So you know what? I might as well just not even do anything at all. So fondness and admiration is the antidote for contempt. Now, defensiveness, right? We become very defensive with one another. So instead of becoming defensive, right, where the wife says, "Oh, you know what? Don't you see the room? All your clothes on the floor. Why don't you ever pick them up?" And the husband says, "So don't you see the kitchen and all the dishes? Why don't you clean that up?" Right? And you go back and forth. It's about taking responsibility, right? We have to take responsibility for our own actions and what we're doing. This is what part of being a grown-up is all about, is being responsible, right? When you move out of the house, when you get married, you have to have responsibilities, and you have to realize that, this is part of being an adult, right? Is taking responsibility, and every single thing that my spouse says, I should not just become defensive and throw it back at them. Instead, I should ponder, I should reflect and say, okay, what should I do, and how should I become better? Let me do that, right? And the last one is, instead of stonewalling, right? When you notice that your spouse has checked out, when you notice that they're not mentally there anymore, try soothing them. And this is very difficult, I get it, because at this point, we've already came so far in this process, and it's hard now because emotions are running high. So as a person, read some Quran, do some deep breathing, do something that helps you as a person, soothe yourself. But as a spouse, we should try being supportive. We should try putting ourselves in a position to help them and understand where they're coming from. This all goes back to being trustworthy and having a commitment to our relationship. So, you see how these 4 sledgehammers really damage the relationship. And, and I want to leave off with this, is that this is the last slide, and then we could get into questions, inshallah. Is that, see, there's hukukul ibad and hukukullah, right? The rights of Allah and the rights of the people. If we don't fulfill the rights of the people, how can we fulfill the rights of Allah, right? If I'm disrespecting my spouse, if I'm not fulfilling their rights, then I'm not fulfilling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rights. There's a level of taqwa that has to be there, that even if my spouse is doing things that are not right or that are hurting, like I'm not happy with, at the end of the day, I'm still going to treat them like a human being. I want to be better. We always tell kids, I have 3 kids, and, I always tell them that do better. Even if another child comes up to you and yells at you and screams at you and all that, I don't want them to throw up their fist. I mean, yeah, you should defend yourself, right? But at some point, don't just become aggressive immediately. Try to mediate, try de-escalating the situation. I told my son, we always tell our kids, be the first to apologize. Be the better person. But why is it that we tell our kids this, but then we don't do it in our own marriages, right? We're so stubborn in our own marriages that it's all about ego. I'm waiting for my spouse to say sorry first. I'm waiting for them to come to me and say sorry, or else I'm just going to sit here, or I'm not going to talk to them, and now not 1 day goes by, 2 days goes by, 3 days goes by, and I've seen couples for a week that have not talked to each other. That's ridiculous. I'm sorry to say. Right? That's ridiculous that we live with this person, we have a life with this person, but yet we're so stubborn, we can't even apologize, but yet we tell our kids to do the exact same thing. We tell them to apologize, we tell them to be the bigger person, but we're not willing to be the bigger person in this thing. I mean, we cannot have it one way, right? It goes both ways. So that's the first thing that I want to say, is that there has to be a level of taqwa in the relationship, right? But focus on your friendship with your spouse. Like I said, it's very sad today that there's no friendship. And I get it. Sometimes we might have been forced into a relationship, married to somebody, or over time things have, diminished. But it's not too late to work on it. That's what I'm trying to say. It's never too late to improve the marriage. But if you're not going to do anything and you're just going to automatically assume that everything's going to get better, it's not. But there's things that we could do as a couples, right, to enhance the relationship. I'll give you an example of one of my best friends. The first time I saw him, I didn't even like the guy, right? I was like, this guy's too arrogant, right? I was like, man, what's wrong with this guy? He just annoyed me. But by the time we kept seeing each other inside the same social circles over time what happened, I realized that I misjudged him. that this guy actually has really good qualities. That yeah, he's not the ideal best friend or everything that I like, but he's trustworthy, he has commitment. I know that I could call him up at 3 a.m. in the morning and he's gonna be there for me. And he's gonna drive down and help me out with whatever I need. And I've seen that in my own life where he's done that, right? So that's why I value him so much. But it took us time to get to that place. It's not gonna happen, I gave him a chance after chance after chance, eventually got there. But now you're married to this person. Why not keep giving him a chance and working on it, right? It's not that it's been so terrible. There's some good parts of it, but we have to give each other that chance to do it, right? So, friendship protects against feeling adversarial toward your spouse. When you have a friendship, what happens is that you're willing to overlook their bad qualities, right? You're willing to overlook it. You're willing to have that positive sentiment, and that's going to override everything negative about the person. So just make sure that, we work on that friendship. And I know that I'm done with the slides, but I want to go into one last thing, and I think this is very important. So if there are any kids, I would just say, again, close your ears, especially my daughter in the back. You could leave for a second. Abda, get out for a second. Just for a second. Because I want to talk about one very important aspect of marriage that we are very shy of talking about, but we need to talk about. I'm waiting for that kid to leave. Just because I don't want to, it's an adult conversation. I want to be respectful so that I don't say anything that the child goes home and says, Mom, Dad, what happened? What is he talking about? Right? But it needs to be talked about, and if I'm not talking about it, then I'm not doing my job. Right? It's intimacy. Intimacy. We don't talk about it. We just push it under the rug. But what happens is that there's a lack of intimacy within the relationship. The Prophet ﷺ, we see with him and Aisha radiallahu anha how intimate they were, right? I mean, intimacy is not just sexually as well, but it's everything that leads up to that point. Where Aisha radiallahu anha would put her lips, the Prophet ﷺ would put his lips. We have narrations where the Prophet ﷺ would put his head in her lap, right? Even there are narrations of them getting intimate with one another as well, right? And what would happen? So we need to realize that this is important and very important part of a marriage. Think of this, right? Two people get married. They don't really know each other that well, right? Yeah, we get to know each other, but we never lived with each other. We never traveled with each other. So we don't really know each other, right? Because that's a hadith, that you don't really know a person until you live with them or you travel with them. So now, on the first night, right? Is there really love in that relationship yet? I wouldn't say. I mean, I like the person. They like me a lot. But after that first night, or whenever, during that first week, how it goes from 0 to 100. Think about how the relationship drastically changes by this one act. One act that changes the whole relationship. And now the next day, the couples are all over each other. They, quote unquote, love each other, right? When there's a lack of intimacy in a relationship, that damages the marriages a lot. That damages the marriages. And that's where you see people getting into pornography. That's when you're seeing people infidelity. That's where you see lack of friendships, right? If I'm getting my core needs met, I don't need to look outside. I don't need to look at other things. I'm satisfied with what I'm getting. And on top of that, it makes me appreciate my spouse more for what they're giving me and fulfilling my needs. And at that time, I'm willing to overlook a lot of other things. The problem is we're not getting needs fulfilled on both sides. And then what happens is that we get very angry. We get very upset. And these are all symptoms. My dad's a doctor, right? And a foolish doctor, he always said, is a person that says, okay, my head hurts, my foot hurts, my head hurts, and you're trying to treat every single part of the body and saying, oh, do this for your hand, do this for your head, do that. No, what is the core issue that's causing your head, your hand, your foot to hurt? What is it? I mean, I'm not saying that intimacy is the answer for every little thing, but it's a big part of marriage. And 5 reasons that I said for marital discord, one of them is intimacy. So as couples, when there's a lack of intimacy and it goes on for a long time, guess what happens? Now that we get angry with each other, right? And we're not willing to forgive one another. But when you do have intimacy with one another, you feel closeness. You feel connected. You feel like they're a part of you. right? Just the intimacy aspect of it. That's why we need to talk about this. So that's why, we have to have a healthy amount of intimacy in the relationship. And it's just not a light switch. This is another thing that I want people to realize. It's not just say, hey, let's have sexual intimacy tonight. No, set the mood from the beginning. Like they always say, make America great again, right? I say make marriage fun again. We're so boring in our relationships. So boring. Like we get married to have fun. You get married to go out with the person. Like I drove all the way here. If I didn't have my wife, it would have been a boring drive, right? From Chicago to St. Louis. But I had her in the car, we talked, my kids were in there, it made it fun. Like I can't drag my best friends with me because they have their own life, but I could definitely drag my wife with me, right? And vice versa. That's why we do this stuff. Is that when she had to go for a school play one time when she was in college, she dragged me along. I hated the play, but I was there. It goes both ways, right? So that's why we get married, is to have fun. But now when we don't have that, we have that spouse and we can't do anything with each other, and it just seems like such a drag, that's the problem. So we need to make marriage fun again. And like when I say intimacy, start off in the morning. Text your spouse, you're looking cute, you're looking nice. Why not flirt with your spouse? What's wrong with flirting with your spouse? I mean, yes, we're not flirting with anybody else, we're flirting with our spouse. We're making them smile. There's nothing wrong with that. Being cute with your spouse, flirting with them, getting them in that mood. And then eventually, when it comes nighttime, of course, it's gonna happen because the whole day is built up. It's not that, okay, you're working, she's working, and now all of a sudden it's like, hey, I'm ready. It's not gonna happen, right? It starts from the beginning of the daytime, and we build it up. And the last thing I'll say is date nights. Have a date night with your spouse. There's nothing wrong with doing on dates with your children. Drop off your kids to the in-laws, drop off your kids to whoever, get a babysitter, whatever you need. Spend 2-3 hours alone. It should not always be with the kids, because the kids bring a different element. Right, I have 3 kids. When it's with me and my kids, our attention is on our 2-year-old, right? She's throwing food, she's doing this, she's saying daddy, daddy, and all this stuff. I can't focus on my spouse, right? But when it's me and her, now I could have adult conversations. We could talk to each other. We could be, I could understand her, she could understand me. We could actually do things, right? Whereas all the events are geared towards the kids. So go on regular date nights with your spouse. Once a week or once a month, whatever it is, start off somewhere, right? Don't make your marriages boring. We need to learn to make it fun again. So I'll end with that, inshallah. Any questions you have?
Just before we take the questions, can you just kind of speak about Ihsan coaching and who else you deal with besides marital?
Yeah, we don't just deal with marital. So all of us, myself, we have Sister Hannah Rana, we have Sister Rawana Bulani, Sister Asma Mahran, and we are Sister Sahar as well, and we're adding, inshallah, 2 more people to our team. So these are, all of us are licensed therapists, alhamdulillah. All of us have actually got our masters or doctorates in counseling, social work, or clinical psychology, alhamdulillah. The reason why coaching is because therapy has a very negative stigma attached to it, right? What people don't want to be diagnosed with a label. And in therapy, for insurance purposes, you often have to diagnose a person, and you have to label them with ADHD or OCD or whatever it is, right? So the reason why we do coaching is because now everybody has struggles, everybody has problems in their life, but not everybody needs a diagnosis, right? So that is where Ihsan coaching comes in, is that we help people with moderate to mild issues. Right now, if you have a manic disorder or suicidal ideation, something like that, yes, we tell them to go to a therapist because that requires more intensive care. But these are for everyday things that we don't have somebody to talk to. We don't know who to turn to. I say this, your friends, they could be helpful, but they don't really know what to do in those situations. I mean, how many friends can I think on top of my head, if I went to them with my problems, they're able to advise me properly? They might actually tell me the opposite. I actually have one friend who said, you know what, I don't like to talk about anything too deep, right? He can't get into his feelings, emotions like that. But we all have problems and struggles that we go through, but we don't know who to turn towards. So this is an avenue where you have licensed professionals who are coaches, right? They're actual therapists. So I know that could be a little bit confusing, but inshallah, you can read about it on the pamphlets and our thing. and they're able to help you get from point A to point B, right? Solution focused, getting us where we need to be. You know, it's faster paced rather than therapy, which is very slow paced. Therapy deals more with the trauma. This deals with the here and now and going forward. So it's very useful, I think so. I see a lot of therapists, psychologists going into coaching because it's more practical as well in many situations. Not to put down anything in therapy, but just to understand it and know that there's a different avenue. We don't always need to go for therapy, right? We can always go for coaching. And we work with individuals one-on-one. We work with premarital people that are looking to get married, and we work with marital couples as well. So I would say go on our website. We have articles we're writing up. You could read about what we're trying to do, what it is, and inshallah, hopefully you can find some benefit. If not you, somebody else that you know that's going through a situation, inshallah. All right. Good. All right.
Yes.
All right. Any questions? Yes.
So I do a lot of reading on this topic myself, and I've been reading on different authors and doctorates in this program, but I've never heard of Dr. Gottman. So do you have a good book that you would recommend, like an actual book,
Yeah.
not online?
7 Principles of Marriage.
That's his book?
Yep.
Do you recommend any others? Because I'm writing this down.
Well, that's the one that I would, like, that comes on the top of my head. I'm pretty sure that there's other books of his, but I just can't think of it at this moment.
What's the title, sorry?
The 7 Principles of Marriage,
Okay.
right? I recommend everybody to read that book if you can. It's amazing. So there's, like I said, there's so much more. Like I only got to the first foundation. We didn't get to the second foundation. We didn't even talk about Love Languages by Gary Chapman. There's so much more of how to enhance the marriage. I just want to give you a taste and something practical. And one thing I'll say before we go on, 2 pieces of advice that are homework that I want to give every single couple here. 5 minutes a day, turn towards your spouse and talk to them, right, for 5 minutes a day. Number 2 is every single night, before you go to sleep, turn towards your spouse again and say 1 word of fondness of admiration towards them, right? So as you do this, you're building up positive sentiments and you're replacing the negative sentiments with the positive. So every single day we should, even if it feels awkward, if it feels weird, we should turn towards each other and we should say something, I appreciate this about you, I appreciate that. There's nothing wrong with making your spouse smile, right? So we should try doing that, inshallah. All right, any other questions? Yes.
So, in our communities, like, mostly we're coming from India, Pakistan,
Yeah.
Arab countries, etc. So this is a very new thing, we're not used to it in Catholics.
Yeah.
I learned in Catholics, they actually, before they get married, they have to go through therapy. Because
Yeah,
it's such a big, part. They want they don't believe in divorce. So they want their marriages to succeed. Now, what can in our culture, focus is to get our kids married. It's a responsibility. Kids are getting older. Just have to get them married. There is no work on to get them to get married successfully, or how their lives are going to be. So, this is a great initiative that Masjid is doing, introducing you. By the way, the presentation was great. So how can our Masjid and Imams and other people emphasize?
Well, mashallah, you have a great imam who's trying, right? He's trying to emphasize it as much as possible. This is our 3rd program here. So, it takes real leaders to actually see the needs of the community and trying to bring a solution to that, which alhamdulillah Mufti Sahib is doing. And he could only do so much, but now it's the job of the community to respond, right? I'm not saying I'm a nobody, so I don't even care if you don't show up for me. But when we do have programs like this, where's the people, right, to learn about it? The premarital aspect, the marital aspect, because these are things that are going to directly impact our children, going to directly impact us. So the imam could only do so much. Right? He could say it after Jummah khutbahs, he could say it after things, but now it's the responsibility of the congregants to actually show up and learn as well. So, alhamdulillah, I have to say that Mufti Sahib over here, he's actually trying to do something, right? Where a lot of masajid where I pitched the idea, it's like, yeah, we'll see, I don't know how well it's going to be bought in and so forth, right? In Malaysia, in Malaysia, the government actually mandates it that before they get married, because they're a Muslim country, that they have to do premarital before they get married. Malaysia does that. In Detroit, in the African American community, they actually mandate this as well. So now it's our responsibility to say, okay, we got it. If we're going to do this, the board or whatever it is says that, all right, we want to help with the marriages. We don't want to have such a high divorce rate because as you're seeing, it's only getting higher. We're matching almost close to non-Muslims now. And not only does it affect the couple, it affects everybody, the family. Think about the parents that have to go through that, seeing their child. Think about the in-laws. Think about everybody that has to deal with that. It does not affect just those two people. So we need to play a bigger part, and that's why I talked about it again. Because yes, in the first session, when I did this premarital thing, it was all college students. But even if the college students say that, yeah, I want to do it, they don't have the money to do it, right? And because they just started off. Now it's our job as the parents to say, no, before you get married, I'll allow you to get married, and we should encourage marriage because of the Sunnah of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But here's the money. I want you to do this. We're willing to ice sculptures for $20,000. Ice sculptures, which is gonna melt. I've seen people come in elephants, right, to their marriages. I mean, you guys all seen everything, right? I mean, you go to Pakistan, India, you see the most extravagant things. Over here in America, people are driving off from the Maseratis or whatever, right, at the end, and so forth. We spend all the money on all these things to show people, but we won't do what, I mean, this is not even that expensive. Fine, forget us, go to somebody else. I don't even care if you don't come to us, but go to somebody and see how much it costs. It's not that much. We're actually cheaper than anybody else because I did all the market value. But what I'm trying to say, I do all the research beforehand, so I can say we're cheaper. But you know, like $500, $100 per session, most people are $150. But even if you say $500 I spent, you know how much divorce costs? The average divorce costs? The average divorce costs $5,000. So 500 to 5,000. You know, what do you rather do? I mean, if I'm a smart man, I'll be like, all right, 500, here you go. Right? So we need to do our job as parents, especially. So even if I say that the family is good, I don't care if the family's good. I'm gonna make sure because I want to make sure my daughter is okay with that guy, and vice versa. Because maybe he doesn't like some things, or maybe there's some things that he realizes that, oh, you know, she needs to improve on. That's fine. Now you could work it out. Because when we try working it out after the marriage, it's much more difficult. It's much more difficult at the time. Right? So, inshallah, that's something. We'll take more questions. If one question doesn't come up, I'm going to ask a question and answer it because I think it's so important that we talk about it. But if we could just pass around the mailing list, I think it's behind you, just so that, you know, so that you guys can keep updated. We do not spam anybody. I promise you. Right? It's only beneficial stuff or that we email. So I don't like spam, so I don't spam. All right. Any other questions? Yes.
So if we're interested, what is the process to start?
So you go on our website right here, ihsancoaching.com. I don't have internet, so I'll go or I'm not connected to the internet. You go on our website, you say click get started. You see all of us listed there. You see myself, you see all of the other people, and you could book according to your timing. So that's what we did. Since I try to make it easier, I hated the whole thing of calling a doctor's office and going back and forth of the timings. So now I list all the timings, and you can book according to what works for you. So it's a very simple process. Alhamdulillah. All right, any other questions? So, I want to bring up one thing, is in-laws. Because we often just don't talk about this, right? And I see this happen all the time with in-laws. You know, the usual problem happens is not between the father-in-law and the son-in-law, it's between the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law. And you see this vicious cycle keep repeating itself century after century, time after time. You know, it's now become like a joke, right? That the in-laws thing. And I have to say one thing, right? As men, we have to do. Because often what I hear from a lot of guys is they say, okay, let my wife and my mom figure it out. I don't want to get involved. The reason being is because, you know, I love my mom, I love my wife. I don't want to hurt each person. But that's a recipe for disaster. That's what's going to cause a lot more problems. Because you can't have these two women try figuring it out. It's not going to happen, right? The mother-in-law is going to feel entitled in her way. The wife is going to feel entitled in her way. Now it's the responsibility of the husband, who both those women love, to step in and mediate. The husband has to come in, and if the mom is saying something, he has to tell his mom, hey, you know what, I think you could do some things a little bit better, and try helping her with that situation. Why? I'll tell you why. The reason being is because my mom is willing to forgive me. I'm her blood. I could do everything, right? I have 3 kids. Even if my kids said something to me, at the end of the day, I still love them because they're my children. But that daughter-in-law is not my mom's child. So if my wife says something to my mom, she's going to be like, how badtamiz is she, right? How can she do this? And she's going to keep that in her mind. And now the next time, she's going to be like, okay, this is the problem. And she's not going to like my wife. So it's my responsibility to come in and shield that off, block that off. And same thing with my wife. If my wife is stepping out of line, I have to step in because my wife loves me. So I could say, hey, you know what? We have the friendship. We get each other. You know, maybe you should take it easy, relax. Let me talk to my mom about it. But, you know, you should be doing X, Y, Z as well. So my wife will be willing to listen to me and hear me out and try changing because we have that relationship. But if my mom said the exact same thing, she's going to be like, who are you to tell me? Right? And say, oh, I don't like your mom. And now I don't want to come around. So you see this often happens is where the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law have problems, but as men, we need to step in and solve that issues, right? If we did that, we could mediate it, it would decrease the tension, and you'll see a better relationship between the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law. They don't gotta be best friends at the end of the day, but they need to get along. And you know, often what happens is that people get mad, well, I want you to come to my mom's house, or so forth. Look, there is a level of amount that's healthy that you need to go, right, for your spouse. You're doing it for your spouse to make them happy. But, you know, if they're doing the bare minimum, okay, now I don't have to be best friends with my in-laws as well. So, okay, as long as they're not stopping me from going to my parents' house, right? They did their duty, they came there once a week. Now, if I want to go extra, okay, you go ahead. Now, I should not be hurt that my spouse doesn't come every single time because they at least did their bare minimum, right? They did the thing to respect them and they're doing it for me, and vice versa. So if my wife wants to go, she shouldn't expect me all the time to go either, right? Now, if I go, alhamdulillah, if I don't, okay, at least he did it. He has a good relationship, but I'm not being stopped. So I just wanted to mention that because we often see this happen within couples, and in-laws is a big problem. All right. Any other questions? All right.
Inshallah.
All right. Jazakumullah khairan, and I really appreciate you all on a Saturday night coming out and listening to this talk. Thank you.
Just wanted to mention again that, alhamdulillah, we do have a partnership we have established with Ihsan Coaching, and we have a special rate with them, actually. So, mashallah, Brother Farhan has given us a discounted rate. So anytime anyone in our community wants to utilize their services, we have a special link where you can schedule, and you will get the discounted rate, inshallah. And even those who cannot afford that discounted rate, our social services will come in and they will help and assist those people who cannot afford it. So we're really thankful to our social services department for that as well, inshallah. Yes. Jazakallah khair, everyone.
Brother is right here.
Jazakallah khair.